In the vibrant village of Lumumba, nestled deep within the heart of Africa, there lived a woman named Nyoka. Nyoka was known far and wide as the village witch, though many whispered that she was more of a healer than a sorceress. She lived on the edge of the village, in a small hut surrounded by lush forests and the songs of birds. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Nyoka heard a faint cry outside her hut. Curious, she stepped out into the storm, her eyes scanning the darkened landscape. There, on her doorstep lay a tiny baby wrapped in a woven blanket soaked from the rain but crying out with surprising strength. Nyoka gently picked up the baby, her heart softening as she looked into its big innocent eyes. She took the child inside, dried it off, and warmed it by the fire. As she rocked the baby to sleep, she wondered who had left it there and why. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Nyoka named the baby Amani, which means peace in Swahili, hoping the name would bring the child a calm and happy life. As Amani grew, Nyoka taught her everything she knew about herbs, healing, and the mysteries of the forest. The villagers watched from a distance, their fear of Nyoka slowly turning into respect as they saw how lovingly she cared for the child. Amani grew into a curious and kind-hearted girl, always eager to help the villagers with her knowledge of plants and remedies. Despite living with Nyoka, who still carried the title of witch, Amani was loved by all. She had a special gift. She could communicate with animals. Birds would perch on her shoulder, and even the wildest animals seemed to calm in her presence. One day, as Amani was gathering herbs near the river, she met a young man named Sufu. Sufu was a brave warrior known for his strength and courage. He was intrigued by Amani's unique abilities and her gentle nature. They quickly became friends, often spending time exploring the forest and sharing stories. However, not everything was peaceful in Lumumba. Strange things began happening in the village. Livestock went missing, crops wilted overnight, and a sense of unease settled over the people. The villagers, desperate and fearful, turned to Nyoka and Amani for help. Nyoka, with her wisdom and experience, suspected dark forces at work. She knew that to protect the village, she and Amani would need to uncover the source of this evil. Together with Sufu, they embarked on a journey deep into the heart of the forest, where ancient secrets and powerful magic awaited them. As they ventured deeper, they encountered mystical creatures and overcame numerous challenges. Each step brought them closer to understanding the darkness that threatened their home. Along the way, Amani discovered more about her own mysterious origins and the true extent of her powers. Their journey was fraught with danger, but with courage and unity, they pressed on. Little did they know that the key to saving Lumumba lay hidden in Amani's past and the bond she shared with Nyoka. Their journey led them to the ancient baobab tree, known as the Tree of Knowledge. It was said that this tree held the wisdom of the ancestors and the power to reveal hidden truths. Nyoka, Amani, and Sufu approached the tree with reverence, hoping it would guide them. As they stood before the towering tree, Nyoka whispered an ancient incantation. The air around them shimmered, and the tree's bark began to glow slowly. An apparition of an old, wise man appeared before them. He introduced himself as Mbali, the guardian spirit of the baobab tree. "Why have you come, seekers of truth?" Mbali asked in a deep, resonant voice. Amani stepped forward, her voice steady yet respectful. "Great Mbali, our village is in danger. Dark forces have descended upon us, and we seek to uncover their source and save our home." Mbali's eyes sparkled with ancient wisdom as he studied Amani. "The darkness you face is born of a long-forgotten grudge. Many years ago, a powerful sorcerer named Mbali was banished from Lumumba for his malevolent practices. He swore vengeance and has now returned, using dark magic to disrupt the peace." Nyoka nodded, her face grim. "I remember Mbali. He was consumed by his thirst for power. We must stop him before his darkness spreads further," Mbali continued. To defeat Mbali, you must find the three sacred relics hidden within the forest: the crystal of light, the amulet of strength, and the scroll of wisdom. These relics, when combined, will give you the power to confront and overcome him. Sufu clenched his fist, determination etched on his face. We will find these relics and save our village. With Mzi's guidance, they set off deeper into the forest, each step taking them closer to the hidden relics. Their first destination was the Cave of Echoes, where the crystal of light was said to be guarded by a fierce spirit. As they entered the cave, the air grew cold, and their footsteps echoed eerily. Suddenly, a ghostly figure materialized before them. It was the spirit of an ancient warrior, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "Who dares enter my domain?" the spirit demanded. Amani, her voice calm yet firm, replied, "We seek the crystal of light to save our village from a great evil. Please allow us to prove our worth." The spirit's gaze softened slightly. "To earn the crystal, you must pass the trial of courage. Each of you must face your deepest fears and emerge victorious." The cave walls shimmered, and suddenly they were each transported into their own trial. Nyoka found herself reliving the day she lost her family to a terrible fire, feeling the grief and helplessness wash over her. Amani faced a vision of herself being rejected by the village, shunned and alone. Sufu was confronted by a monstrous beast, a symbol of his fear of failure and letting his people down. Drawing upon their inner strength, they each overcame their fears. Nyoka remembered the love she had given and received, finding peace. Amani realized that her true worth came from within, not from others' opinions. Sufu defeated the beast, realizing that true strength came from the heart. With their fears conquered, they returned to the cave entrance, where the spirit awaited them. "You have proven your courage. The crystal of light is yours." The crystal glowed brilliantly as it was handed to them, filling them with renewed hope and determination. With one relic in their possession, they set their sights on the next: the Amulet of Strength, hidden within the dense and treacherous jungle known as the Green Maze. Their journey through the Green Maze was perilous. They faced quicksand, poisonous plants, and cunning creatures. But with Amani's ability to communicate with animals, they found allies among the forest creatures who guided them through the dangers. Finally, they reached a hidden clearing where the Amulet of Strength was guarded by a colossal serpent. The serpent hissed menacingly, but Amani, with her gift, spoke to it in soothing tones. She explained their mission, and the serpent, sensing their pure intentions, allowed them to take the amulet. With two relics secured, only the scroll of wisdom remained. It was hidden in the enchanted lagoon, a place of serene beauty but guarded by a deceptive water spirit. As they approached the lagoon, they could feel the magic in the air. Nyoka, Amani, and Sufu knew that their greatest challenge was yet to come. But with the crystal of light and the amulet of strength, they felt prepared. Little did they know, Mbali was watching their every move, growing more desperate to stop them. As they approached the enchanted lagoon, the air grew thick with enchantment. The water sparkled under the moonlight, and the sound of gentle waves lapping against the shore was soothing. Yet, they knew danger lurked beneath the surface. Nyoka, with her vast knowledge of magic, instructed Amani and Kofi to stay alert. The water spirit here is known for its trickery. We must remain vigilant and true to our purpose. They waded into the lagoon, the water cool against their skin. Suddenly, the surface rippled, and a beautiful, ethereal figure emerged. Her hair flowed like water, and her eyes glowed with an eerie light. "Why do you seek the scroll of wisdom?" the water spirit asked, her voice echoing like ripples on a pond. Amani stepped forward, her voice clear and sincere. "Great Spirit, our village is under threat from a dark sorcerer. We need the scroll of wisdom to defeat him and restore peace to our home." The spirit's eyes narrowed, assessing the truth in Amani's words. "Wisdom is not easily given. To earn the scroll, you must answer 3 riddles. Fail, and you shall remain here forever. Nyoka nodded. We accept your challenge. The spirit smiled, her teeth sharp like the edge of a wave. Very well. Here is your first riddle. I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind. What am I? Amani thought carefully, then answered, an echo. The spirit's smile widened. Correct. Here is your second riddle. I am not alive, but I can grow. I do not have lungs, but I need air. I do not have a mouth, but water kills me. What am I? Kofi pondered this for a moment before responding, a fire. The spirit nodded approvingly. Correct again. Now, for the final riddle. I am seen in the water if seen in the sky. I am in a rainbow, a jay's feather, and lapis lazuli. What am I? Nyoka, her eyes filled with wisdom, answered confidently, the color blue. The water spirit's laughter rang like a clear bell. You have answered all riddles correctly. The scroll of wisdom is yours. From the depths of the lagoon, the scroll emerged, wrapped in a protective bubble of water. Amani reached out, and as she touched it, the bubble dissipated, leaving the scroll dry and intact. With all 3 relics in their possession, they felt a surge of power and unity. But their journey was far from over. They had to confront Mbali and use the relics to thwart his dark plans. As they made their way back to Lumumba, the sky darkened unnaturally, and an ominous wind began to blow. Mbali knew they were coming, and he was ready to face them. They reached the village outskirts and saw Mbali standing at the edge of the forest, surrounded by dark shadows that seemed to pulse with malevolence. His eyes were filled with rage and hatred. So, you think you can stop me? Mbali sneered. You are too late. The darkness is already spreading. Nyoka, Amani, and Kofi stood together, the relics glowing with a powerful light. Amani stepped forward, her voice strong and unwavering. We are not afraid of you, Mbali. We have the power of light, strength, and wisdom on our side. Your darkness will not prevail. Mbali laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the forest. Let's see how powerful you really are. With a wave of his hand, he summoned dark creatures from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malice. Nyoka, Amani, and Kofi braced themselves for the battle of their lives. Nyoka chanted an ancient spell, the crystal of light, amplifying her magic and creating a barrier of light around them. Kofi, wearing the Amulet of Strength, fought the dark creatures with unmatched bravery and skill. Amani, holding the Scroll of Wisdom, used her knowledge to outsmart their enemies and find their weaknesses. The battle was fierce, but the unity and determination of the trio were unbreakable. With each strike, the darkness weakened, and the light grew stronger. As the final dark creature fell, Mbali's confidence wavered. He realized that he had underestimated them. Desperate, he unleashed a powerful wave of dark magic, aiming to engulf them all. Amani, feeling the power of the relic surging within her, stepped forward. This ends now, Mbali. She raised the crystal of light, its brilliance piercing through the darkness. Nyoka and Kofi joined her, channeling their strength and wisdom. The combined power of the relics created a blinding beam of light that shot towards Mbali, engulfing him in its radiance. Mbali screamed in rage and despair as the light consumed him, breaking his hold on the dark magic. The shadows dissipated, and the sky cleared, revealing the warm glow of the sun. The village of Lumumba was saved.